Billionaire CEO finds beaten mom and son outside garage, shocked to learn their oil empire heirs. The autumn wind howled through the industrial complex, rattling windows and whipping loose papers across the parking lot. Ethan stood at his office window, watching dark clouds gather overhead. The weather report had warned of a severe storm system moving in, and he could feel the pressure dropping. "Mr. Bradley, the crew on the loading dock needs your approval on the emergency protocols," his assistant Sarah called from the doorway. Ethan nodded, grabbing his jacket from the coat rack. "I'll head down there now. Make sure everyone in the office knows they can leave early if they need to beat the storm home." The wind hit him full force as he stepped outside, making him squint against the gust. Workers scurried around securing equipment and moving vehicles into the covered areas. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Ethan made his way toward the loading dock. "Get those tarps tied down tight," he called out to a group struggling with a flapping cover over some sensitive equipment, "and double-check all the storm drains are clear." The first fat drops of rain began to fall as he reached the dock supervisor. They quickly reviewed the emergency procedures, making sure everyone knew their roles if the storm turned severe. Ethan had learned early in his career that preparation was everything. A sudden gust of wind caught a stack of empty pallets, sending them clattering across the concrete. As workers rushed to gather them, Ethan heard something else, a sound that seemed out of place among the growing storm noise. He turned his head, trying to pinpoint its source. There it was again, a muffled cry carried on the wind, coming from somewhere near the garage building. Ethan's heart rate picked up. That didn't sound like equipment or debris. "Keep everyone inside once you're done securing everything," he instructed the supervisor. "I need to check something." Ethan jogged toward the garage, rain now falling steadily. The wind whipped his jacket around him as another cry reached his ears, clearer this time. It sounded like a child? He rounded the corner of the building, peering down the shadowy alley that ran alongside it. At first, he saw nothing but scattered leaves and debris being tossed by the wind. Then a flash of movement caught his eye. "Hello?" he called out, having to raise his voice over the wind. "Is someone there?" Lightning split the sky, illuminating the alley in stark white light. In that brief flash, Ethan saw them. Two figures huddled against the garage wall, trying to find shelter under a small overhang. "Oh my God," he breathed, rushing forward. As he got closer, his stomach dropped. He recognized them immediately, Leah and Caleb. They were soaked to the skin, clothes muddy and torn. Leah had wrapped herself protectively around her son, but Ethan could see she was shivering violently. Both had visible bruises on their faces and arms. "Leah, what happened?" He quickly shrugged out of his jacket, draping it over them both. "Are you hurt?" Caleb whimpered, pressing closer to his mother. Leah looked up at Ethan with wide, frightened eyes, her lip trembling. We didn't know where else to go," she whispered hoarsely. Thunder crashed overhead as Ethan pulled out his phone, quickly dialing security. "I need medical assistance at the West Garage immediately," he barked into the phone. Then he crouched down beside them, keeping his movements slow and gentle. "Come on, let's get you both inside where it's warm and dry," he said softly, extending his hand. "You're safe now. I promise." The elevator ride to Ethan's top-floor office was silent except for Caleb's occasional sniffles. Leah kept her arms wrapped protectively around her son, her eyes darting between the elevator doors and Ethan. Water dripped from their clothes onto the polished floor, creating small puddles that reflected the overhead lights. When they reached his office, Ethan immediately adjusted the thermostat and grabbed the emergency blankets he kept in his supply cabinet. "Here," he said softly, holding them out. "You both need to get warm." Leah accepted the blankets with trembling hands, carefully wrapping one around Caleb before putting the other around her own shoulders. They settled onto the leather couch. Caleb pressed close to his mother's side. "Sarah," Ethan called through the intercom, "could you bring up some hot chocolate and tea? And see if maintenance has any spare clothes we can use." He paused, then added, "And please call the Riverside Hotel. We'll need a suite for tonight." While they waited, Ethan kept his movements slow and deliberate, trying not to startle his unexpected guests. He noticed how Leah tensed whenever he came too close, how her eyes tracked his every move. Caleb hadn't spoken a word since they'd come inside, his small face buried against his mother's side. Sarah arrived with the drinks, setting them on the coffee table without comment, though her concerned glance said plenty. Steam rose from the cups, filling the air with the comforting scent of chocolate and chamomile. "It's okay, sweetheart," Leah whispered to Caleb, helping him wrap his hands around the hot chocolate mug. "Take small sips." Ethan sat in an armchair across from them, maintaining a respectful distance. "The hotel isn't far," he said quietly. "We can order some dinner there, get you both settled in for the night." Leah's hands tightened around her teacup. "You don't have to do this, Mr. Bradley. We've already imposed enough." "Ethan," he corrected gently. "And it's no imposition. Please, let me help." The storm continued to rage outside, rain lashing against the windows. By the time Sarah returned with some company sweatshirts and track pants, Caleb had stopped shivering, though his eyes remained distant and wary. At the hotel, Ethan arranged for dinner to be sent up to their suite. They sat around a small table, the sound of forks against plates filling the uncomfortable silence. Caleb picked at his food, while Leah seemed to force herself to eat, as if knowing she needed the strength. Finally, as Caleb curled up on the suite's plush couch with heavy eyes, Leah spoke. "We've been moving around for a while now," she said quietly, staring into her coffee cup. "Staying with friends when we can, but it's not safe to stay in one place too long." Ethan wanted to ask more questions about the bruises, about who they were running from, about why they'd ended up in his company's alley of all places, but he could see the exhaustion and fear etched in Leah's face. She wasn't ready to say more. "You don't have to explain anything tonight," he assured her. "You're both safe here." Leah's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. On the couch, Caleb had finally drifted off, his small chest rising and falling steadily. Even in sleep, his face held a trace of worry that no child should have to carry. "Thank you," Leah whispered, and Ethan could hear how much those simple words cost her. The morning sun barely peeked through the heavy hotel curtains when Ethan's phone buzzed. He'd been up early, reviewing reports in the hotel's lobby while giving his guests space to rest. The caller ID showed it was Marcus, his head of security. "Mr. Bradley, we've got something unusual on the garage cameras from last night," Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. "Someone was trying to access the side entrance around 2 a.m. Couldn't get a clear shot of their face, but they seemed pretty determined." Ethan's jaw clenched. The timing was too coincidental. "Any damage?" "No, sir. They left when our night patrol did their rounds. But—" Marcus hesitated. "There's something else. Those two people you helped yesterday. We found some discarded bags in the dumpster near where you found them. Looked like they'd been searching for something." Running his hand through his hair, Ethan glanced toward the elevator. "I'll look into it. Double the patrols for now, and send me the security footage." He made his way up to the suite, knock gentle but firm. Leah opened the door, already dressed in the fresh clothes his assistant had brought over earlier. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. "Everything okay?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but unable to hide the tremor in her voice. Ethan noticed how she positioned herself between him and Caleb, who sat at the small table eating breakfast. "Just checking in," he said carefully. There was some activity at the garage last night. Would you know anything about that?" Leah's face paled slightly, but she shook her head. "No, we've been here all night. Maybe it was just some teenagers?" Her reply came too quickly, too rehearsed. Ethan studied her face, noting the way her fingers twisted the hem of her shirt. "Leah, if you're in some kind of trouble—" "We're fine," she cut in, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Really, you've already done so much for us." Caleb looked up from his cereal, eyes darting between them before quickly looking down again. The boy's silence spoke volumes. Later that evening, over a dinner of room service pasta, the tension hung thick in the air. Caleb pushed his food around his plate, while Leah seemed lost in thought. "I know you have questions," she finally said, after Caleb had retreated to watch TV in the bedroom. "And you deserve some answers, after everything you've done for us." Ethan set down his fork, giving her his full attention. The overhead lights caught the fading bruise on her cheekbone, making his chest tight with anger at whoever had hurt her. "We've been moving around for about 6 months now," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Different cities, different names sometimes. It's complicated." Her hands shook as she reached for her water glass. "You don't have to tell me everything," Ethan said gently, "but I want to help. I have resources, connections that could—" "No," Leah said sharply, then softened her tone. "I mean, thank you, but the less you know, the safer you'll be. We shouldn't even still be here, but—" She glanced toward the bedroom where Caleb was. "He's so tired of running." Ethan leaned forward, keeping his voice low and steady. "Let me help. Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone." Tears welled in Leah's eyes as she shook her head. "You don't understand. The people we're dealing with, they have connections everywhere. Money, influence. We can't risk involving anyone else." Thunder cracked outside as rain pelted against the office windows. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes, the glow of his laptop screen the only light in the room besides occasional flashes of lightning. The clock on his desk showed 11:43 p.m., another late night reviewing contracts and security reports. A soft knock at his door made him look up. Leah stood in the doorway, her face etched with worry. She wore the same clothes from earlier, but now they seemed to hang more heavily on her frame. "You're still up," she said, wringing her hands. I need to talk to you." Ethan gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What's wrong? Is Caleb okay?" "He's sleeping." Leah sat down, but perched on the edge of the seat like she might bolt at any moment. "Look, we appreciate everything you've done, but we need to leave. Tonight." "In this weather?" Thunder punctuated his words as if on cue. "That's not safe, Leah." She shook her head, running trembling fingers through her hair. "We're putting you in danger just by being here. Those people at the garage last night, they're looking for us. I can't let you get caught up in this." "I'm already involved," Ethan said firmly, coming around his desk to sit in the chair next to her. "And I want to help, but I can't if you won't tell me what's really going on." Leah stood abruptly, pacing the office. Lightning illuminated her face, showing the internal struggle playing across her features. "You don't understand. These people, they're powerful. They have resources, connections. They won't stop until they find us." "So do I," Ethan countered. "Whatever you're running from, we can face it together." She stopped by the window, watching the storm rage outside, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "You really want to know?" Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "We're the last surviving heirs of Summit Oil." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Summit Oil had been one of the largest energy companies in the country before its spectacular collapse 5 years ago. The scandal had rocked the industry. Everyone thought the family lost everything, she continued, still staring out the window. That's what they wanted people to believe. But there were secret accounts, hidden assets. My father, he knew people were coming for him. He made arrangements, set up trust funds in our names that nobody could trace. Ethan leaned forward. The bankruptcy was staged? Leah nodded, turning to face him. The night everything fell apart, these men came to our house. They were looking for documentation, proof of the hidden accounts. Caleb. Her voice broke. He was only 8. He saw things no child should ever see. We barely got out. Your father? Dead? The word fell like a stone between them. They made it look like suicide, but we knew better. We've been running ever since, staying ahead of the people who want what's left of Summit's fortune. Caleb hasn't spoken since that night. Ethan stood, crossing the room to her. Why tell me this now? Because you deserve to know what kind of danger you're in by helping us. Tears spilled down her cheeks. These people, they'll do anything to find us. They've already killed once. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of us. The storm raged on outside, but in that moment the only sound Ethan could hear was Leah's ragged breathing as she tried to control her tears. The truth of her situation, their situation, hung heavy in the air between them. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself against his desk. The Summit oil scandal had been front-page news for months. His own father had talked about it endlessly at dinner, calling it the biggest corporate collapse since Enron. And now, standing before him was living proof that there was more to the story. Sit down, he said gently, guiding Leah back to her chair. She looked exhausted, like the weight of her confession had drained what little energy she had left. Let me get you some water. His hands shook slightly as he poured water from the crystal pitcher on his credenza. Summit Oil's collapse had sent shockwaves through the entire industry. If what Leah said was true about hidden assets. Here, he handed her the glass, watching as she took small sips. Listen, I meant what I said about helping you. My company has resources, security teams, legal counsel. No lawyers, Leah interrupted sharply. The minute we go official with anything, they'll find us. They have people everywhere. Thunder rumbled outside as Ethan considered their options. Then we keep it unofficial for now. But you need to understand that this changes things. If these people are as dangerous as you say, they are. Leah's knuckles were white around the water glass. You don't know what they're capable of. Ethan's phone buzzed on his desk, making them both jump. He glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. His thumb hovered over it for a moment before opening the message. Your family's safety has been compromised. Watch your back. Some legacies are built on bones. A chill ran down his spine as he read the words again. He thought of his mother at their family estate, his sister Sarah at her art gallery in the city. Everything okay? Leah asked, noting his expression. Ethan locked his phone, pushing aside the unease. Probably just another corporate threat. They weren't uncommon in his position. Fine, just business. He forced himself to focus on the matter at hand. We need to think this through carefully. First priority is making sure you and Caleb are safe. We've managed so far, Leah said quietly. By running, Ethan pointed out. But you can't run forever, especially not with Caleb. He needs stability, a chance to heal. Leah's eyes welled up again at the mention of her brother. You don't think I know that? Every time we move, every new city, I see him withdraw more. But what choice do we have? Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. The past always catches up. Protect what matters. He quickly turned the phone face down, trying to ignore the way his heart was racing. The timing was unsettling, but it had to be a coincidence. His company was in the middle of several sensitive negotiations. Threats and warnings came with the territory. "We have choices," he told Leah firmly, even as doubt niggled at the back of his mind. "Starting with you staying here where I can protect you both while we figure this out." The rain continued its assault on the windows, creating shadows that danced across Leah's uncertain face. In the distance, lightning illuminated the city skyline, and for a brief moment, Ethan caught a glimpse of movement in the building across the street, probably just a security guard making rounds. His phone vibrated one more time against the desk. He left it untouched, focusing instead on Leah's tear-stained face and the gravity of the situation before him. Whatever was going on, whatever threats were lurking, he'd made his decision. He would help them, no matter the cost. A piercing scream shattered the midnight silence. Ethan bolted upright in his office chair, where he'd dozed off reviewing reports. The sound came again, more desperate this time, from the guest room down the hall. He rushed to the room, his heart pounding. Inside, Caleb thrashed against tangled sheets, his face contorted in terror. Leah wasn't there. She'd gone to make a phone call earlier. "Caleb, wake up, buddy. You're safe," Ethan called out, approaching carefully. He'd dealt with his nephew's night terrors before, and knew better than to shake someone awake. Caleb's eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. His breathing came in sharp, panicked gasps as he scrambled backward until he hit the headboard. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead. "It's just me, Ethan. You're in my building, remember? You're safe here." Ethan kept his voice steady and calm, though his chest ached at the boy's obvious distress. Recognition slowly dawned in Caleb's eyes, but the fear didn't leave them. He pulled his knees to his chest, making himself smaller. The gesture reminded Ethan painfully of how young he really was. "Would you like some water?" Ethan asked, maintaining a safe distance. Caleb nodded slightly, his shoulders still tense. Ethan poured a glass from the pitcher on the nightstand, setting it within Caleb's reach before settling into the armchair near the bed. "Bad dream?" he asked softly after Caleb had taken a few sips. The boy stared into his glass, his knuckles white around it. "They're always bad," he whispered. "Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes that helps." Caleb's lower lip trembled. He set the glass down carefully, too carefully, like someone used to controlling every movement. "I can't. You can tell me anything, Caleb. Nothing leaves this room." "But they'll hurt you too." Caleb's voice cracked. "Like they're going to hurt your dad." Ethan felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" Tears spilled down Caleb's cheeks now. "I heard them. Before we ran. They were in Father's study, talking about making it look like an accident. Your dad, they said his brakes would fail on Mountain Road." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Mountain Road was the winding route his father took every morning to the golf club. His father, who'd been investigating Summit Oil's collapse. "Who were they, Caleb?" Ethan asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "The men who came after Father died. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything." Caleb's whole body shook now. "Leah doesn't know. I didn't tell her. I was so scared." "Oh, Caleb." Ethan moved to sit on the edge of the bed, and this time Caleb didn't flinch away. "You've been carrying this all by yourself?" "They follow us everywhere," Caleb whispered. "I see them sometimes, in crowds, watching. Dark suits, dark glasses. They're going to find us. And now they'll hurt you too because we're here." Ethan gently placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder, feeling the tremors running through him. "Listen to me. You did the right thing telling me. We're going to figure this out together, okay? No one is going to hurt you, or Leah, or my father, I promise." Ethan paced his office, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. Dawn was breaking outside, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. but he hadn't slept a wink. Caleb's words kept echoing in his mind. Dark suits, dark glasses, making it look like an accident. He pulled out his father's recent correspondence from the bottom drawer of his desk. Letters, memos, and financial reports scattered across the polished surface as he searched for anything connecting to Summit Oil's collapse. His father had been oddly quiet about that investigation lately. A soft knock made him look up. Leah stood in the doorway, dark circles under her eyes matching his own. "You've been up all night," she said. It wasn't a question. "Caleb told me everything." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "About the men in your father's study, about their plans for my father." Leah's face went pale. She gripped the doorframe for support. "What? What plans?" "They're planning to tamper with his car." Ethan walked over and guided her to a chair. "Caleb overheard them. That's why you've been running, isn't it? Because you knew something was wrong at Summit Oil?" Leah's hands trembled in her lap. "I knew Father was worried. He started moving money around, hiding documents. Then one day he just didn't come home." She swallowed hard. "The police said it was a heart attack, but you didn't believe them." "There were men watching our house, following us. I grabbed Caleb and what money I could, and we ran." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't know about your father. I swear, Ethan, Caleb never told me." Ethan knelt beside her chair. "Hey, look at me. This isn't your fault." He took her hands in his, steadying them. "But I need to know everything you remember about those last days at Summit Oil. Any names, conversations, documents, anything that might help us figure out who's behind this." Leah wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Father had a safe in his study. The night before it happened, I saw him putting something inside. He was agitated, muttering about dirty money and they can't get away with this." "Did you ever see what was in that safe?" "No. By the time I went back, it was empty." She met his eyes. "Ethan, these people, they're powerful, connected. If they find out you're helping us—" "I don't care." His voice was firm. "They're threatening my family too now, and I protect the people I care about." He squeezed her hands gently. "That includes you and Caleb. But no buts. You're not alone in this anymore." Ethan stood, determination replacing his earlier exhaustion. "I have resources, connections of my own. We're going to figure out what happened to your father, and we're going to stop them before they can hurt anyone else." Leah looked up at him. Leah looked up at hope and fear warring in her expression. "You really mean that?" "Every word." He helped her to her feet. "I promise you, Leah, whatever it takes, I'll keep you and Caleb safe. We're in this together now." A weak smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen since Caleb's confession. "Together?" she repeated softly, and somehow that single word felt like both a promise and a prayer. The mahogany-paneled conference room felt smaller than Ethan remembered. 3 of his father's oldest business partners sat across from him: Gerald Matthews with his wire-rimmed glasses, Robert Chen drumming his fingers on the table, and Thomas Walker looking as stern as ever. "Summit Oil's collapse?" Gerald adjusted his glasses. "That's ancient history, my boy. Why dig it up now?" Ethan kept his expression neutral, though his heart raced. "I'm reviewing our company's past acquisitions. Due diligence." Robert stopped drumming his fingers. "Everything was above board. Your father made sure of that." "Of course," Ethan said smoothly. "I'd just like to understand the details better. Summit was our biggest rival for decades." Thomas Walker cleared his throat. "James Summers was complicated. Made some poor investments near the end. The market crash didn't help." "And our company's involvement?" The 3 men exchanged glances. Gerald spoke first. We acquired some of their assets after the bankruptcy. Standard procedure. Back in his office, Ethan rubbed his temples. The meeting had yielded little except carefully worded non-answers and defensive posturing. He looked up to see Leah hovering in the doorway, wringing her hands. "You shouldn't dig too deep," she whispered, stepping inside and closing the door. "These men, they're dangerous. I need to know the truth." Ethan pulled out a stack of folders. "Help me look through these. They're records from the Summit acquisition." Leah hesitated, then sat beside him. Her hands shook as she opened the first folder. Hours passed as they combed through financial statements and legal documents. Ethan noticed Leah growing more tense with each paper she read. "Look at this," he said finally, spreading out several documents. "These numbers don't add up. Your father's company was showing massive losses, but there's no clear reason why." "What do you mean?" "These asset valuations." Ethan pointed to a column of figures. "They're artificially low. Someone was cooking the books, making Summit look worse than it was." Leah's face went pale. "But why would—" "Wait." Ethan pulled out another document, this one bearing his father's signature. "This transfer, these account numbers—" His voice trailed off as the implications hit him. "What is it?" Leah leaned closer. "It's a series of offshore transactions, money moving between shell companies." Ethan's hands were trembling now. "Your father's signature is on some of these, but the dates, they're after he died," Leah finished, her voice barely audible. Ethan spread out more papers, connecting the dots. Each document revealed another layer of deception: fabricated losses, manipulated stock prices, forged signatures, a deliberate dismantling of Summit Oil, piece by piece. "My father's company," he said slowly, "didn't just acquire Summit's assets. They orchestrated its collapse." Leah's eyes filled with tears. "All those people who lost their jobs, their savings, and your father." Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. The implications were too horrifying. He looked at Leah, seeing the pain and fear in her eyes. Their family's empires weren't just business rivals. They were bound together by something far darker. His father's signature on these documents linked him directly to the destruction of Summit Oil and possibly to James Summers' death. The weight of this revelation settled over them like a heavy blanket. Everything Ethan thought he knew about his family's legacy, his father's integrity, was unraveling before his eyes. The private dining room at Le Chateau felt like a fortress of luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the mahogany walls, while soft classical music drifted through hidden speakers. Ethan arrived early, choosing a seat that gave him a clear view of both entrances. Marcus Summers swept in exactly on time, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, and his Italian suit immaculate. He carried himself with the easy confidence of old money, but there was something predatory in his smile. "Ethan Morrison." Marcus extended his hand. "What an unexpected pleasure." Ethan stood to shake it, noting the firm grip. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Summers." "Please, call me Marcus." He settled into his chair as a waiter appeared with water. "Though I must admit, I'm curious why the CEO of Morrison Industries wanted such a discreet meeting." Ethan kept his expression neutral. "I've been reviewing some historical business matters. Your family's company came up in my research." "Ah, Summit Oil." Marcus swirled his water glass, ice cubes clinking. "Ancient history now. Such a tragedy. What happened to my dear brother James?" "That's actually what I wanted to discuss." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "The circumstances around Summit's collapse seem unclear." Marcus's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "The market crash hit many companies hard. James made some unfortunate decisions." "Did he?" Ethan pulled out a small notebook, watching Marcus's reaction. The timing of certain transactions suggests otherwise. You're very young to be digging into such old matters? Marcus's tone remained pleasant, but carried an edge. Some might say dangerously young. The waiter returned to take their orders. Ethan used the interruption to study Marcus, noting the slight tension in his shoulders despite his relaxed demeanor. I'm interested in the truth, Ethan said after the waiter left. About Summit Oil, about what really happened to James Summers. Marcus dabbed his lips with his napkin, taking his time before responding. The truth? My brother was an idealist in a ruthless industry. He trusted the wrong people. His eyes met Ethan's. Your father understood this business better. What exactly do you mean by that? William Morrison was a pragmatist. He knew how to navigate difficult situations. Marcus's smile turned knowing. Like father, like son, I assume? Ethan felt his pulse quicken, but kept his voice steady. I prefer to make my own assessments. Of course you do. Marcus leaned back. But some assessments are better left unmade, for everyone's sake. Their main courses arrived, the rich aroma of perfectly cooked steak filling the air. Marcus cut into his meat with precise movements. I had nothing to do with Summit's downfall, he said between bites. Though I wonder if you've asked your father about his role in those events. My father's not well enough to discuss business matters anymore. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Just as interesting questions start surfacing about old dealings. Ethan felt a chill, despite the room's warmth. Every answer from Marcus seemed to raise two more questions, and the implications about his father were becoming increasingly disturbing. If you'll excuse me, Marcus stood, leaving his meal barely touched. I have another engagement, but Ethan? He paused, straightening his jacket. Be careful what you go looking for. Some doors are better left closed. Ethan watched him leave, his own appetite gone. Marcus had denied any wrongdoing, yet his hints about William Morrison suggested he knew far more than he was saying. The carefully crafted responses and veiled warnings left Ethan with a growing sense of unease. Something wasn't adding up, and he had a feeling the truth was far darker than he'd imagined. Ethan watched Caleb from his office doorway. The boy sat curled up in the window seat, rain streaming down the glass beside him. His small fingers traced patterns in the condensation, but his eyes seemed focused on something far away. Hey, buddy, Ethan said softly, not wanting to startle him. Would you like some hot chocolate? Caleb shrugged without turning around. The gesture was so slight, Ethan almost missed it. Over the past few days, the boy had retreated further into himself, speaking less and less. Ethan made 2 cups anyway, adding extra marshmallows to Caleb's. He approached slowly, setting the mugs on a nearby table. Mind if I join you? Another tiny shrug. Ethan settled on the opposite end of the window seat, giving Caleb space while staying close enough to talk. Sometimes when I'm feeling down, watching the rain helps, Ethan offered. But sometimes it makes me feel lonelier too. Caleb's fingers stilled on the glass. Do you... His voice was barely a whisper. Do you ever feel scared of remembering things? I do, Ethan answered honestly. Some memories are hard to face. Caleb pulled his knees tighter to his chest. Grandfather used to say I was weak for being afraid, that I needed to be tougher to run the company someday. Ethan's heart ached at the pain in the boy's voice. That wasn't right of him to say. Being afraid doesn't make you weak. He'd get so angry when I cried. Caleb's voice trembled. He'd make me stand in his office for hours, telling me all the ways I was disappointing the family. Ethan pushed down his rising anger at the cruelty. No child should ever be treated that way. Mom tried to stop him. Tears began rolling down Caleb's cheeks. She'd tell him I was just a kid, that he was being too harsh. But then they'd fight, and it would get worse. Ethan grabbed a box of tissues from his desk, placing them within Caleb's reach. The boy took one, clutching it tightly. She started teaching me secret games, Caleb continued, his voice growing stronger. Like how to be really quiet when walking, or how to remember different ways out of buildings. I thought they were fun at first, but he wiped his eyes. She was preparing me to run away. Your mom sounds very brave, Ethan said gently. She wanted to protect you. Caleb nodded, finally turning to look at Ethan. His eyes were red but clearer than they'd been in days. She said our family's money came with a price, that some people would do anything to control it. He reached for his hot chocolate, taking a small sip. The night we left, she told me we were choosing a different path, that we didn't have to be what they wanted us to be. She was right, Ethan said firmly. You get to choose who you want to be, Caleb. No one else. But what if I don't know who that is yet? That's okay too. Ethan smiled warmly. Part of growing up is figuring that out, and you don't have to do it alone. Caleb studied him for a long moment. You're different from them. You're kind, like Mom. I want to help you, Caleb, both you and your mom. Ethan met the boy's gaze steadily. Whatever it takes, we'll find a way forward together. I promise. For the first time in days, Caleb's shoulders relaxed slightly. He picked up a marshmallow from his cocoa and popped it in his mouth, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. The security monitor in Ethan's office beeped, drawing his attention away from his morning coffee. His head of security, Marcus, appeared on the screen with a concerned expression. Mr. Blake, we've detected someone suspicious near the west entrance. They've been circling the building for the past hour. Ethan leaned forward, studying the grainy security footage. A figure in a dark coat kept to the shadows, occasionally glancing up at the windows. Have they tried to enter? No, sir, but their behavior suggests surveillance rather than random loitering. Double the patrols, Ethan ordered, his stomach tightening. And send me clear images if you can get them. As he ended the call, Leah burst into his office, her face pale. Someone's watching us, aren't they? Her hands trembled as she clutched the doorframe. Come in and close the door, Ethan said quietly. He guided her to a chair, noticing how her breathing had become shallow and rapid. Try to stay calm. Security is handling it. They found us, Leah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. We stayed too long in one place. I knew we should have left sooner. She started to rise, but Ethan gently pressed her back into the chair. Talk to me, Leah. Who are these people? She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking slightly. They've been after us for years, ever since Mom discovered the truth about the company's finances. Her voice cracked. They're ruthless, Ethan. They'll do anything to keep their secrets buried. Who exactly are they? Former board members, corrupt executives, people who worked with both our families. Leah's fingers dug into her arms. They orchestrated the company's bankruptcy, stole millions. Mom found proof of money laundering, offshore accounts, everything. But before she could expose them, she choked back a sob. Ethan knelt beside her chair. That's why you've been running? She nodded. We never stay anywhere more than a few weeks. Different names, different cities. Caleb hasn't been to school in 2 years. Tears spilled down her cheeks. These people, they have connections everywhere. Police, government, private security. We can't trust anyone. You can trust me, Ethan said firmly. You don't understand. Leah's voice was desperate. They'll hurt anyone who helps us. They've done it before. Friends, relatives, anyone who tried to protect us ended up... She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan took her trembling hands in his. Listen to me. I have resources, connections of my own. We can fight this. No, Leah pulled away. We need to leave, now, before they… Running isn't the answer, Ethan interrupted. You and Caleb deserve better than living in fear. He stood up, his expression determined. I'm not letting you face this alone anymore. Why? Leah looked up at him, confusion mixing with her fear. Why would you risk everything for us? Because it's the right thing to do. Ethan moved to his desk, pressing the intercom. Marcus, I want the safe house prepared. Full security detail. He turned back to Leah. And because I care about what happens to you and Caleb. Fresh tears welled in Leah's eyes. But these were different. Tears of relief, of finding someone willing to stand beside them after so long alone. We're going to handle this properly, Ethan continued. Together. No more running. The safe house's kitchen was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of Leah's spoon against her tea mug. Outside, the security team patrolled the perimeter, their shadows passing periodically across the windows. Ethan sat across from her at the small breakfast table, watching as she stared into her drink. I should have told you everything from the beginning, Leah said softly, breaking the silence. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug. The moment you took us in, you deserved to know the truth. You were protecting Caleb, Ethan replied. I understand that. Leah shook her head, her shoulders tense. It's more than that. Every time I think about how I lied to you, how I put you and your company at risk. She swallowed hard. The guilt is eating me alive. Leah. No, please, let me finish. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You've been nothing but kind to us. You opened your home, your heart. Her voice cracked. And I repaid that kindness with secrets and lies. Ethan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You did what you had to do. Anyone in your position would have done the same. Would they? She pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just like them, the people we're running from, manipulating others, hiding the truth. That's not true, Ethan said firmly. You're nothing like them. But even as he spoke the words, a small seed of doubt took root in his mind. There were still so many unanswered questions, so many pieces that didn't quite fit together. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the moment. Ethan pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number. The message was brief but chilling. The plan is in motion. Your father's security has been compromised. Time is running out. His hands grew cold as he read the words. This was the second anonymous warning he'd received, and it confirmed his worst fears. The threat against his father wasn't just talk. It was real and imminent. What is it? Leah asked, noticing his expression. Ethan hesitated, studying her face. Despite his doubts, despite the growing complexity of the situation, he couldn't deny the genuine concern in her eyes. Another warning, he said finally, showing her the message. Someone's trying to tell me something, but I can't figure out who to trust. Leah read the message, her face paling. Oh God, she whispered. It's happening faster than I thought it would. What do you mean? Before she could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. Check the offshore accounts. Follow the money. Your father's signature is on everything. Ethan's chest tightened as the implications sank in. His father wasn't just a target. He was involved somehow. The plot was bigger and more dangerous than he'd imagined, and it was moving forward whether he was ready or not. He looked at Leah, who seemed to have shrunk in her chair, her earlier guilt now mixed with visible fear. Whatever was coming, they were both caught in its path, and time was running out to stop it. Ethan's shoes clicked against the marble floor of the parking garage as he made his way to his car. The underground space was dimly lit, creating long shadows that made him increasingly nervous. He checked his watch, 9:45 p.m. Margaret Chen, his father's longtime financial advisor, had agreed to meet him at a small diner across town. The drive felt longer than usual, his mind racing with possibilities. Margaret had been with the company for over 20 years, and if anyone knew the truth about his father's dealings, it would be her. The neon sign of Joe's all-night diner buzzed overhead as Ethan parked. Through the window, he could see Margaret already seated in a corner booth, her gray hair pulled back in its usual tight bun. She looked up as the bell above the door chimed. "You look tired," she said as he slid into the booth. "It's been a long week." Ethan kept his voice low, though the diner was nearly empty. "Thank you for meeting me so late." A waitress approached with coffee, and they waited until she was out of earshot before continuing. "I know why you're here," Margaret said, stirring sugar into her cup. "The warnings you've been receiving aren't random, Ethan." He leaned forward. "You know about those?" "I've been watching things unfold for months now." She pulled out a thick manila envelope from her briefcase. "Your father. He's made some questionable decisions that have put a lot of people in danger." "Including Leah and Caleb's family?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "So you know about them?" She pushed the envelope across the table. "These documents show a pattern of systematic dismantling of their family's assets. Your father wasn't working alone, but he was a key player." Ethan's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, contracts, and correspondence that painted a disturbing picture of corporate sabotage. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. "Because I've worked too hard and too long to watch everything fall apart now." Margaret's voice was firm. "The people threatening your father, they're not just after revenge. They want to destroy both companies, and they're using old grudges to do it." "Both companies? But Leah's family business is already—" "Not destroyed," Margaret cut in. "Hidden, protected by a network of shell companies and trusts. Caleb's mother made sure of that before she disappeared." Ethan sat back, processing this new information. Caleb's mother was brilliant, Margaret finished. She knew this day would come. The documentation she left behind, the evidence Caleb and Leah have been protecting, it's enough to expose everyone involved in the conspiracy. "That's why they're being hunted," Margaret nodded. "And why they're your best chance at stopping what's coming. Caleb's family, what's left of it, they're not just victims in this, Ethan. They're the key to unraveling the whole thing." The waitress returned to refill their cups, and Ethan used the moment to gather his thoughts. He thought of Leah's guilt, Caleb's nightmares, the weight they'd been carrying all this time. "The evidence they have," he said once they were alone again, "it could save both companies?" "If used correctly, yes, but it has to be handled carefully. The wrong move could destroy everything and everyone involved." Ethan stared at the documents, understanding now why Leah had been so guarded, why she'd fought so hard to protect Caleb. Their family hadn't just been victims. They were guardians of the truth, carrying the power to either save or destroy two corporate empires. Back at his office, Ethan found Leah sitting by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The meeting with Margaret had left him drained, but seeing Leah's silhouette against the night sky gave him a strange sense of calm. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly, not wanting to startle her. Leah turned, offering a weak smile. "Too much on my mind?" She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "I keep thinking about everything that's happened, how much I've kept from you." Ethan settled into the chair beside her. The city sprawled below them, a maze of lights and shadows. "You did what you had to do to protect Caleb." It's not just that. Leah's voice cracked slightly. Every time you look at me with such trust, I feel like I'm betraying you all over again. There's so much more to this story, Ethan. So many layers of deception. He watched as she struggled with her words, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. The night Caleb overheard that conversation about your father, she continued, we weren't just passing by. We were there because... She paused, taking a shaky breath. Because we'd been tracking the people who destroyed our family. We thought we were getting closer to the truth. Ethan reached out, gently taking her trembling hand. You don't have to explain everything now. But I do, she insisted, because every day we stay here puts you in more danger, and you deserve to know why. Tears welled up in her eyes. We've been carrying these secrets for so long, Ethan. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in them. The weight of Margaret's revelations pressed heavily on Ethan's mind. He wanted to tell Leah everything he'd learned, but uncertainty held him back. Whatever you're protecting, he said carefully, whatever truth you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Leah's eyes met his, filled with a mix of gratitude and fear. I wish it were that simple. Ethan squeezed her hand gently before standing up. Let me show you something. He walked to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer, pulling out a worn leather briefcase he'd retrieved from his father's old office earlier that day. As he opened it, a musty smell filled the air. Inside were stacks of papers, photographs, and a small leather-bound book. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the book. I found this while going through my father's old things, he explained, opening the ledger. At first, I thought it was just another financial record, but... The pages were filled with careful notations, dates, and coded entries. But what caught his attention were the familiar names scattered throughout, including Leah's family name and references to offshore accounts. This isn't just a ledger, he said, his voice tight. It's a record of every transaction, every move made against your family's company. He flipped to the final pages, where the entries became more frequent and urgent. And here's where it all connects. The last entry, dated just weeks before Leah and Caleb appeared at his door, contained a single line. Final arrangements made. CS must be eliminated before proceeding. Leah's face paled as she read the initials. CS, Caleb Summers. Ethan's stomach churned as the pieces fell into place. The ledger wasn't just evidence of past crimes. It was proof of his father's direct involvement in the ongoing plot against Caleb's family. The truth he'd been searching for had been sitting in his father's office all along, carefully documented in his own handwriting. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Ethan's phone buzzed on his nightstand. His hand fumbled in the darkness, heart racing as he recognized the emergency tone he'd set for his security team. Mr. Harrison? The voice on the other end was tense. There's been an incident involving your father. Ethan sat bolt upright, his free hand gripping the sheets. What happened? Is he okay? He's alive, sir. But there was an attempt on his life about an hour ago. His security detail intercepted a shooter outside his home. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His throat went dry as he thought of Caleb's tearful confession just the day before. Was anyone hurt? One of the security guards took a bullet to the shoulder. Your father is shaken, but unharmed. We've moved him to a secure location. Ethan's hands trembled as he rushed to dress. Everything Caleb had warned about was coming true. The nightmare was real, and his father had nearly paid the price. In the hallway, he almost collided with Leah, who was already dressed and looking worried. I heard you talking, she said softly. Is it... They tried to kill my father, Ethan replied, his voice hollow. Just like Caleb said they would. Leah's face paled. Oh God, Ethan, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. I need to see him. I need to make sure he's safe. Of course. Leah hesitated, then touched his arm gently. But Ethan, please be careful. If they're moving this openly now. I know. He met her concerned gaze. Will you stay with Caleb? Make sure he's okay? She nodded, and Ethan hurried to his car. The drive to the safe house felt endless, his mind racing through everything he'd learned in the past few days. The ledger entries, Margaret's warnings, Caleb's confession, it all pointed to a conspiracy far deeper than he'd imagined. The safe house was a modern apartment building on the outskirts of town. 2 security guards escorted him to the penthouse, where he found his father sitting in an armchair, looking older and more vulnerable than Ethan had ever seen him. Dad, Ethan said, relief flooding through him at the sight of his father alive and whole. Richard Harrison looked up, his face drawn. Someone tried to kill me, son. His voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the underlying shock. After all these years, all I've built. Ethan sat across from him, studying the man who'd taught him everything about business, about success, the man whose signature he'd seen in that damning ledger. We'll figure this out, he said carefully. We'll find who's behind it. His father's eyes narrowed slightly. You know something, don't you? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan thought of Leah and Caleb, of the trust they'd placed in him. He thought of the dark secrets hidden in that leather-bound book, of his father's possible involvement in the destruction of their family. Looking at his father now, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. The conspiracy had to end, even if it meant questioning everything he'd ever believed about his family's legacy. Even if it meant standing against his own father to protect those who needed his help. We need to talk, Dad, he said firmly, about everything, about the Summers family, about what really happened to their company, and about why someone might want you dead. His father's face hardened, and in that moment, Ethan knew. The path ahead would be difficult, but he had to follow it, wherever it led. The truth, and justice, demanded nothing less. The office was eerily quiet as Ethan faced Marcus Summers across his desk. Leah's uncle carried himself with the practiced ease of someone used to getting his way, his expensive suit and polished demeanor a stark contrast to the ruthlessness in his eyes. You're a smart businessman, Ethan, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. Surely you can see the opportunity here. He pulled out a leather portfolio and placed it on the desk between them. Your father's empire is built on sand. I have proof of every illegal deal, every corrupt contract. Ethan's jaw tightened. And what exactly are you proposing? An alliance. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Help me take down your father's corrupt regime, and I'll make sure you emerge unscathed. Better than unscathed, you'll be seen as the hero who exposed the corruption. We can rebuild both our companies, the right way. The right way? Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. Like how you've been hunting down your own family, terrorizing your nephew? Marcus's smile faltered. Caleb and Leah are misguided. They don't understand what's necessary to survive in this business. No. Ethan stood up slowly, planting his hands on the desk. They understand perfectly. They've seen the real cost of your kind of business, the human cost. Don't be naive, Marcus snapped, his composed facade cracking. Your father's no better than I am. We all do what we must to succeed. Maybe that's been true until now, Ethan said, but it stops here. I won't help you destroy my father just so you can take his place. The corruption ends with our generation. Marcus's face darkened. You're making a terrible mistake. I'm offering you a chance to save yourself. I don't need saving, Ethan replied. What I need is to make things right. All of it. What my father did, what you did. It all comes out in the open. You fool, Marcus snarled, standing abruptly. You have no idea what you're up against. Actually, I do. Ethan pressed a button on his desk phone. And so does the FBI agent who's been recording this conversation. The door opened, and 2 agents entered the room. Marcus's face went pale as they approached him with handcuffs. Marcus Summers, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and corporate fraud, one agent announced. As they led Marcus away, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a text from his security team. Package secure, coming home. 20 minutes later, Ethan stood in the lobby as Leah and Caleb walked through the front doors, flanked by his security team. Caleb looked shaken but unhurt, and Leah's eyes were bright with unshed tears of relief. You're safe now, Ethan said, pulling them both into a tight embrace. Marcus is in custody. He can't hurt you anymore. But it's not over, is it? Leah asked quietly, meeting his gaze. Ethan shook his head. No. We still have to deal with my father, expose the truth about both companies. It won't be easy. We'll face it together, Caleb said, his voice stronger than Ethan had ever heard it. All of us. They moved to Ethan's office, where maps and documents covered his desk, plans for the battle ahead. As they gathered around, Ethan knew they had a long fight ahead of them. But looking at Leah's determined face and Caleb's newfound courage, he felt ready for whatever came next. The mahogany-paneled study felt smaller than Ethan remembered from his childhood. Maybe it was the weight of the documents in his hands, or perhaps it was his father's imposing presence behind the massive desk. Richard Harrison's silver hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, giving him an almost ethereal appearance. Dad, Ethan began, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. We need to talk about what happened to the Summers family 15 years ago. Richard's pen stopped moving across the paper he'd been signing. His eyes, the same deep brown as Ethan's, lifted slowly. What brings this up now? Ethan placed the leather folder on his father's desk, spreading out the damning evidence one piece at a time. Bank statements, private investigator reports, encrypted emails that had been decrypted. I know about the systematic dismantling of their company. I know about the threats, the blackmail, everything. Son. Richard's voice held a warning note. No, Ethan cut him off, laying down the final piece, a photograph of a younger Richard shaking hands with Marcus Summers. I need to hear it from you. The truth. Richard stood up slowly, walking to the window. His reflection showed a flicker of something Ethan had never seen before: uncertainty. The business world isn't black and white, Ethan. Sometimes we make choices. Choices? Ethan's voice cracked. You helped destroy their company. You knew about the plot against Caleb's parents. You were part of it. I did what was necessary. Richard turned, his composure cracking. The Summers empire was corrupt to its core. They were dealing with cartels, funding terrorist organizations. Yes, I worked with Marcus. He came to me with proof of their activities. Ethan felt the room spin slightly. So you decided to become judge, jury, and executioner? We tried to handle it legally at first, Richard's voice softened. But they had judges in their pockets, politicians on their payroll. The only way to stop them was to dismantle their empire from within. And Caleb's parents? Their deaths weren't accidents, were they? Richard's silence was answer enough. The greater good, Richard finally said, returning to his desk. Sometimes protecting the many means sacrificing the few. The company employs thousands, Ethan. Their livelihoods, their families, all of that was at stake. Ethan sank into a leather chair, feeling the weight of each revelation like a physical blow. The father he'd idolized, the man he'd strived to become. How much of it had been real? Marcus played you, Ethan said quietly. He manipulated you into helping him take control. He's been hunting down his own family, trying to kill his own nephew. That wasn't part of the plan, Richard admitted, a flicker of regret crossing his face. Marcus promised to protect the innocent members of his family, but by then it was too late to stop what we'd set in motion. You could have come clean. You could have tried to make it right. And risk everything we'd built? Richard shook his head. The company is my legacy, Ethan. Your legacy. Everything I did was to protect that. Ethan stared at his father, seeing him clearly for the first time. A man who'd convinced himself that the ends justified the means, who'd wrapped his morality in layers of rationalization until black and white had blurred into an acceptable shade of gray. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Dad, Ethan said softly, and you've been laying down bricks for 15 years. Richard reached for the documents, his hands trembling slightly. What do you plan to do with these? Ethan stood up, feeling simultaneously hollow and heavy. I honestly don't know anymore. Marcus Summers sat across from Ethan in the dimly lit conference room, his expensive suit and carefully styled silver hair a stark contrast to the tension in the air. Through the wall of windows, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, casting shadows across the polished table between them. Your father's reputation will be destroyed if this gets out, Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk. But it doesn't have to end that way. We could work together, Ethan. Create something new from the ashes of both our empires. Ethan's fingers drummed against the leather portfolio containing the evidence. You mean betray my father the way you betrayed your own family? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes glinting. I did what was necessary to survive. Your father understood that once. The business world isn't built on sentimentality. It's built on power and control. And what about Caleb? Ethan's voice hardened. Your own nephew? Was terrorizing him part of your survival strategy? Caleb is... Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Collateral damage. The boy knows too much, saw too much. But with your help, we could protect him. Give him a new life, far away from all of this. The way you protected his parents? Ethan's words cut through the air like ice. Marcus's facade cracked slightly, a flicker of something darker crossing his features. I'm offering you a chance to save your father's legacy while building your own. Think about it. Our combined resources, your vision, my experience. We could reshape the entire industry. Ethan stood up slowly, gathering the documents. You know what I see when I look at you? A man so twisted by greed he's forgotten what really matters. You destroyed your own family for power, and now you want me to do the same? Don't be naive, Marcus snapped, his composure slipping. Your father's hands are just as dirty as mine. The only difference is I'm offering you a choice. No, Ethan said firmly. You're offering me a chance to become exactly like you, and that's something I'll never do. Marcus's expression darkened. Then you'll lose everything. Your father's empire, your reputation, everything you've worked for. Maybe, Ethan agreed. But I'll still have my soul. The door opened, and Ethan's security team entered, followed by Leah and Caleb. The sight of them, safe and whole, made Ethan's heart lift. Leah's eyes were bright with determination, while Caleb stood straighter than Ethan had ever seen him. Marcus's face paled at the sight of his niece and nephew. What is this? This, Leah said, her voice steady, is family standing together. Something you wouldn't understand. Ethan moved to stand beside them, feeling the strength of their unity. It's over, Marcus. We have everything we need to expose both your crimes and my father's. But unlike you, we're going to do this the right way. Legally. Transparently. We're taking back what's ours, Caleb added quietly, meeting his uncle's gaze without flinching. Marcus stood up, straightening his tie with practiced precision. You have no idea what you're up against. Actually, we do, Ethan replied. And we're ready. As Marcus was escorted out by security, Ethan turned to Leah and Caleb. Are you both okay? Leah nodded, her hand finding Ethan's. "We're fine. But he's right about one thing. This won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "But we'll face it together." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Ethan's office as he, Leah, and Caleb spread documents across his desk. Stacks of papers, USB drives, and folders created a maze of evidence that would change everything. "Are you sure about this?" Leah asked, sorting through financial records that proved the connection between her uncle and Ethan's father. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized the papers into neat piles. Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We've triple-checked everything. The paper trail is clear. Money laundering, corporate espionage, and—" He paused, glancing at Caleb, who was hunched over his laptop. "And the assassination attempts," Caleb finished quietly, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he compiled the digital evidence. "The emails prove Uncle Marcus ordered them." Leah moved closer to her brother, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be here for this part, Caleb. You've done more than enough." "I need to see it through," Caleb insisted, looking up with determination in his eyes. "I've been running for too long." Ethan watched them, his heart heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. The evidence before them would destroy not just Marcus Summers, but Ethan's own father as well. Years of corruption, betrayal, and violence would finally come to light. "The press release is ready," Ethan said, checking his phone. "And our lawyers have verified everything. Once we send this out, there's no going back." "What about your father?" Leah asked softly, moving to stand beside him. "Have you spoken to him?" Ethan shook his head, his throat tight. "He made his choice long ago. I have to make mine now." The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of Caleb's laptop and the ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the city buzzed with ordinary life, unaware of the storm about to break. "The encrypted files are uploaded," Caleb announced, turning his laptop around. "All the financial records, emails, and security footage, everything's ready to go." Ethan pulled up the press release on his computer screen. They had worked through the night to craft it, making sure every word was precise, every accusation backed by irrefutable evidence. His finger hovered over the send button. "Together?" Leah suggested, placing her hand over his on the mouse. Caleb joined them, adding his hand to theirs. "Together," Ethan agreed. They pressed the button as one. For a moment, nothing happened. The office remained quiet, the sun continued to shine, and the world kept turning. Then Ethan's phone began to buzz. One notification after another lit up the screen as news outlets picked up the story. Leah turned on the office television. Every major network was breaking the news. Headlines flashed across the screen. "Massive corporate conspiracy exposed." "Oil empire heirs reveal years of corruption. Industrial dynasty built on lies." Caleb's phone rang, their lawyers confirming that federal investigators were already moving to secure offices and freeze assets. Ethan watched as his father's company stock began to plummet. "Look," Leah whispered, pointing to the television. The footage showed police cars pulling up to Marcus Summers' office building. Through the glass walls of his high-rise office, they could see their uncle being led away in handcuffs, his perfect facade finally crumbling. Across town, similar scenes played out at Ethan's father's corporate headquarters. Years of carefully constructed lies were falling apart in minutes. The police station buzzed with activity as Ethan and Leah waited in the interview room. Through the one-way glass, they could see Marcus Summers, Leah's uncle, being led in by two officers. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his normally perfect hair disheveled. The handcuffs gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Are you ready for this?" Ethan asked quietly, watching Leah's reflection in the window. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. I've been ready for years. The door opened, and Marcus was brought in. His eyes, usually sharp with calculation, now darted between them like a cornered animal. The officers secured him to the table and stepped back, remaining vigilant. "Hello, Uncle Marcus," Leah said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. Marcus's lip curled. "Come to gloat, dear niece? Bringing your new friend to watch my downfall?" "No," Ethan replied, placing a folder on the table. "We're here to make sure you understand exactly what's happening." He opened the folder, spreading out documents one by one. Bank statements, emails, photos, each piece of evidence another nail in Marcus's coffin. "You see these?" Leah pointed to a series of transactions. "This is where you started siphoning money from our family's company. And these," she laid down several surveillance photos, "show your men following us, following Caleb." Marcus's facade cracked slightly. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can," Ethan said, pulling out his phone. He played a recording, Marcus's own voice discussing the assassination attempts. The color drained from the man's face. "You recorded me?" His voice shook with rage. "You taught me well, Uncle Marcus," Leah replied. "Always keep evidence, always have leverage." The detective in charge stepped forward, laying out more papers. "Mr. Summers, we have enough here to put you away for a very long time. Corporate fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy." Marcus slumped in his chair, the fight leaving him. "You don't understand. The company was failing. I had to do something." "By trying to kill a child?" Leah's voice cracked. "By forcing us to run, to hide, to live in fear?" "I did what was necessary," Marcus snapped, lunging forward against his restraints. The officers moved quickly to contain him. Ethan placed a steadying hand on Leah's shoulder. "It's over, Marcus. The truth is out. Both companies will have to rebuild, but they'll do it honestly this time." As the officers prepared to take Marcus away, he looked at Leah one last time. "You've destroyed everything our family built." "No," Leah said firmly. "You did that. We're just picking up the pieces." They watched as Marcus was led away, his shoulders hunched in defeat. The detective thanked them for their cooperation and left them alone in the room. Leah released a shaky breath, leaning against the wall. "I can't believe it's really over." Ethan joined her, both of them staring at the scattered evidence of years of deception. "Not over. Just changing. Both our families have a lot of healing to do." "The companies will survive?" Leah asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. "They will," Ethan nodded. "Different, maybe smaller, but built on something real this time. No more shadows, no more lies." Leah looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "When I first met you in that storm, I never thought—" She paused, collecting herself. "I never thought I'd find someone I could trust again." The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive office, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Ethan stood before his father's old desk, now his desk, running his fingers along its smooth surface. The nameplate had already been changed. Ethan Crawford, CEO. He'd spent the weekend personally clearing out the old files, the physical reminders of decades of corruption. The shredding company had taken away box after box of documents, while others had been handed over to the authorities as evidence. The office felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of secrets had been lifted. A gentle knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Leah stood in the doorway, Caleb beside her, both dressed formally for the upcoming board meeting. "Ready?" Leah asked, straightening her blazer. Ethan nodded, gathering the presentation materials he'd prepared. "As ready as I'll ever be." Caleb, looking more confident than he had in weeks, stepped forward. "You're doing the right thing, Ethan." The boardroom was packed when they arrived, Familiar faces lined both sides of the long table. Some worried, others curious, a few openly hostile. These were people who had worked with his father for years, who had benefited from the old way of doing things. Ethan took his place at the head of the table, Leah and Caleb flanking him on either side. He spread his papers before him and looked at each face in turn. "I know many of you are concerned about the direction of Crawford Industries," he began, his voice steady and clear. "The recent revelations about my father's actions have shaken this company to its core. But today, we start rebuilding." He clicked through his presentation, outlining his vision for the company's future: transparent accounting practices, environmental responsibility, fair labor practices, community investment. "Our profit margins will be smaller initially," he acknowledged, addressing the concerned murmurs. "But we'll be building something sustainable, something we can be proud of." One of the older board members, Johnson, spoke up. "Your father built this empire through shrewd business decisions. These idealistic changes could destroy everything." "My father built this empire on lies and exploitation," Ethan countered firmly, "and it nearly destroyed 2 families in the process." He gestured to Leah and Caleb. "We have a chance to do better." Leah stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "The Summers-Crawford partnership will set new industry standards. We're not just talking about corporate responsibility. We're implementing it." The meeting continued for hours, addressing concerns, explaining strategies, winning over the skeptics one by one. By the end, even Johnson was nodding thoughtfully at their proposals. As the board members filed out, Ethan remained at the table, looking at the empty chairs. Caleb approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You showed real leadership today," the boy said, sounding older than his years. "He's right," Leah added, gathering the presentation materials. "Your father led through fear and manipulation. You're leading with honesty and compassion." Ethan stood, looking out the boardroom windows at the city below. Workers were already removing the old Crawford Industries sign, preparing to replace it with the new logo, a symbol of the merged companies and their shared future. "It won't be easy," he said, watching the workers below. "Changing an entire corporate culture, rebuilding trust." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Leah replied, standing beside him. Caleb joined them at the window, the 3 of them watching as the old sign came down. The sunlight caught the edge of the new logo being lifted into place, its metal surface gleaming with promise. Below, employees gathered to watch the change, phones out to capture the historic moment. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Dr. Sarah Mitchell's office as Caleb settled into the plush armchair. The teen's fingers fidgeted with the sleeve of his sweater, but his posture was more relaxed than it had been during his first session 3 weeks ago. "Would you like to continue where we left off last time?" Dr. Mitchell asked, her voice gentle and encouraging. Caleb nodded, taking a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how it wasn't my fault." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When Uncle Marcus would yell at Mom, I used to hide in my closet. I thought if I was really quiet, maybe everything would just go away." Outside the office, Leah sat in the waiting room, thumbing through a magazine without really seeing the pages. Ethan had taken to accompanying them to these sessions, wanting to show his support. He placed a comforting hand over hers. "He's getting stronger," Leah whispered, managing a small smile. "Every session, I see a little more of the old Caleb coming back." Inside the office, Caleb continued to share his story. "Mom always tried to protect me. She'd tell me stories about brave knights and heroes when things got bad. But I knew. I could always hear the fear in her voice." Dr. Mitchell nodded encouragingly. "That must have been very difficult for both of you." "Yeah," Caleb agreed, his voice steadier now. "But you know what? Ethan reminds me of those heroes Mom used to tell me about. He actually did save us." After the session, Caleb emerged from the office looking tired but lighter somehow. These emotional excavations were draining, but necessary. Ethan and Leah stood to meet him, forming a protective circle around him as they walked to the car. Back at home, Caleb headed upstairs to work on his homework, something that would have been unthinkable just months ago. The simple act of focusing on normal teenage tasks was its own kind of therapy. Leah watched him go, then turned to Ethan in the kitchen. Dr. Mitchell says he's making remarkable progress. She thinks talking about the past is helping him process everything. Ethan pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, preparing their afternoon coffee, a ritual they'd developed over the past months. He's incredibly resilient, just like his mother. They moved to the back porch, their favorite spot for quiet conversations. The garden Leah had started was beginning to bloom, splashes of color breaking through the earth like hope made tangible. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how far we've come," Leah said, warming her hands around her mug. "A few months ago we were running, hiding, afraid to trust anyone." Ethan watched as a butterfly landed on one of Leah's newly planted roses. "And now look at us. A real family." "That's what Caleb called us yesterday," Leah said softly. "He said it so naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant sound of Caleb's music drifting down from his bedroom window. The scene was so wonderfully normal, so peaceful, it brought tears to Leah's eyes. Ethan reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. No words were needed in this moment, just the quiet acknowledgement of how far they'd come and the deep bond that had grown between them all. Above them, Caleb's window opened, and the sound of his laughter floated down as he talked on the phone with a friend from his new school. It was the sound of healing, of moving forward, of finding joy again. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the newly renovated conference room. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his sleeves rolled up as he reviewed proposals with Leah and Caleb. The atmosphere was different now. Gone were the dark wood panels and heavy curtains that had made his father's boardroom feel like a fortress. In their place were bright, open spaces and comfortable chairs that invited collaboration. "These solar panel installations could really help the communities near our refineries," Caleb said, pointing to a detailed diagram. At 16, he had shown a natural talent for environmental science, and his fresh perspective had become invaluable. Leah nodded, making notes on her tablet. "The initial cost is higher, but the long-term benefits to both the environment and our relationships with local residents would be worth it." "Exactly what I was thinking," Ethan agreed, smiling at how in sync they'd become. "We're not just here to make profits anymore. We're here to make a difference." They spent the morning reviewing applications from small businesses seeking partnerships. Each proposal was carefully evaluated not just for its profit potential, but for its impact on communities and the environment. It was a complete departure from how things had been done before. "Remember when this room used to terrify me?" Leah asked during their lunch break, looking around at the transformed space. "Now it feels like home." Caleb was already diving into his sandwich. "That's because we actually listen to people now, like yesterday when that worker came to us about the safety concerns at Site B. And we shut down operations until everything was double-checked," Ethan added proudly. "Dad would have called that wasteful, but I call it responsible leadership." The afternoon brought a meeting with union representatives, something that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. Ethan, Leah, and Caleb sat together, actively listening to concerns and suggestions from the workers. There was no hint of the old power dynamics that had caused so much strife. "We'd like to propose a new healthcare package," Leah explained, sharing documents with the union reps. "One that actually covers families properly." The representatives looked shocked, pleasantly so. One of them, a veteran worker named Mike, spoke up with tears in his eyes. In 30 years here, I've never seen management that actually cared about us like this. As the day wound down, they gathered in Ethan's office to review their progress. The walls, once decorated with imposing oil paintings, now displayed children's artwork from the company daycare they'd established. The profit margins are smaller, Ethan acknowledged, looking at the quarterly reports. But we're building something sustainable, something we can be proud of. And the employees are happier, Caleb pointed out. Did you see the retention numbers? They're the highest they've ever been. Leah smiled, reaching for both their hands. Come on, you two. Time to head home. I'm making lasagna. Later that evening, they sat around their kitchen table, the smell of garlic bread filling the air. The formal dining room had been converted into a shared office space. They preferred the coziness of the kitchen for their meals. To us, Ethan raised his glass of water, looking at the two people who had changed his life so completely. And to doing things the right way. Leah raised her glass as well. To family, the one we chose. To second chances, Caleb added softly, his eyes bright with contentment. They clinked their glasses together, the simple sound representing all they had accomplished. The company was growing stronger each day, but more importantly, it was growing better, more ethical, more compassionate, more human. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the company's rooftop garden. Ethan, Leah, and Caleb sat on comfortable chairs among the newly planted vegetation, another change they'd made to the building's stark architecture. The gentle hum of bees visiting the flowering plants filled the air, while the city stretched out before them, a testament to how far they'd come. Remember that first stormy night? Leah asked, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. I was so scared, so unsure of everything. Caleb nodded, his feet tucked under him as he lounged in his chair. I thought we'd never stop running. He reached for another cookie from the plate between them. Now look at us. We're actually helping other people find their way. Ethan watched a flock of birds soar past, their wings catching the last rays of sunlight. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would think of all this. The community outreach programs, the environmental initiatives, the profit sharing with employees. He might not understand it, Leah said gently, but that doesn't make it any less right. The rooftop garden had become their favorite spot for evening reflections. The vegetables growing in raised beds would supply the company cafeteria, while the flowers attracted pollinators and brought beauty to what was once just empty space. Like everything else they'd built together, it served multiple purposes: practical, environmental, and spiritual. Did you see Jennifer from accounting today? Caleb asked, grinning. She was showing everyone pictures of her daughter's first day at our new daycare center. I've never seen her so happy. That's what real success looks like, Ethan replied, his voice warm with pride. Not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but actual lives being changed for the better. A cool breeze rustled through the garden, carrying the sweet scent of herbs and flowers. Below them, the last of the day shift workers were heading home to their families, no longer forced to work the punishing hours that had once been standard. We're creating something different here, Leah observed, watching the workers leave. Something that could change how other companies do business, too. It's already happening, Ethan said. 3 other corporations have asked about our employee wellness programs, and that article last week about our environmental initiatives has sparked quite a bit of interest. Caleb stood up and walked to the edge of the garden, where the last rays of sun were disappearing behind the horizon. It's like we're planting seeds, he said thoughtfully, not just here in the garden, but everywhere we go. The city lights began twinkling to life below them, creating a tapestry of light and shadow. The world was changing, and they were part of that change, not through force or manipulation, but through compassion and understanding. Ethan moved to stand beside Leah, their shoulders touching as they watched the day fade into night. The weight of their shared journey hung between them, not as a burden anymore, but as a foundation for everything they'd built. "We've come so far," Leah whispered, her eyes reflecting the emerging stars above. Ethan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. In that simple gesture lay all the promises they'd made to each other: to stand together, to fight for what was right, to build something meaningful from the ashes of the past. Together, they stood at the edge of their rooftop sanctuary, holding hands as the last sliver of sun disappeared. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope, a testament to the power of love and redemption to transform even the darkest of legacies into something beautiful.